So if you haven't heard, augmented reality, or AR for short, is claiming to be the next big thing. But it's been around for a while. If you've ever used a face filter or know about the dancing hot dog or played Pokemon Go, or sometimes Amazon lets you try different furniture in your room, this is all AR. Different from virtual reality, where you cover your eyes and you're completely immersed and transported to an entirely different world. Augmented reality turns your phone's camera into a window where digital content like art, videos, and holograms and 3D models appear and track over the real world. Think of it like your eyes teaming up with your phone screen to show you a new layer of reality. Augmented reality. Now, Apple recently came out with the new Apple Vision Pro, and now people are starting to shovel more money at this stuff. And I imagine that once this technology becomes good enough to feel like a normal pair of glasses, which it will, man, everyone's gonna have one. But until then, AR is experienced in the phones, which everyone has. And some people are already saying that this is gonna change the way we tell stories and play video games. And I'm inclined to agree. Because with today's technology, you can put just about anything in augmented reality and experience it from just about anywhere. I mean, I can think of a million use cases, and we're just at the beginning. Like guys, this is similar to when the motion picture was just starting to become popular, and filmmakers and directors realized they could take the camera off of this linear, stage-like axis and tell stories and shoot films in all three dimensions. Except in this case, instead of being the viewer behind the screen, you can be the character in the video game. You get to be the camera of the story, and the entire world is your map. Okay, so now to the purpose of this video. Making AR experiences used to be really difficult. It required an understanding of both 3D computer graphics and computer programming that used extremely complex softwares with steep learning curves that made you want to give up as soon as you started. But not anymore. See, there's a platform called Hoverlay that is making headlines in the AR community, and it makes it really fast and easy to put just about anything in AR. And best of all, it works on just about any smartphone or tablet that was made in the last 6 years. Yes, you too, Android. There's no coding, there's no app deployment. Hoverlay makes it as simple as upload and save, and immediately your content can be seen and shared by anyone in the world in AR. And I'm going to show you how.
So let's do this thing!
To get started, open your favorite web browser and type spaces.hoverlay.com. Log into your account, or if it's your first time using Hoverlay, create a new one. And then we'll jump right into making our AR experiences. Okay, so welcome to Hoverlay. This is the homepage to your Hoverlay channel. And a Hoverlay channel is just like a YouTube channel, except that instead of hosting videos on your channel, you host self-contained augmented reality experiences that are called spaces. So let's go ahead and make a space. You can either click Start in the center or click the My Spaces tab in the top left corner. And this is the page where you would see all of your spaces. But if it's your first time doing it, you won't see any. So let's start by clicking New Space in the top left. And now there's a little bit of setup before we can make our space, but it's as simple as where and when, what and how. And throughout this setup, we'll go through some basic AR concepts that are very important to know. But once you get familiar with this process, it really only takes a few seconds. First off, it's important to understand that your space can be accessed and viewed a couple of different ways, either by a QR code, a link, or by map. With a QR code, you scan it using your phone, and your AR experience opens up, and a URL link works the same way. However, you can, if you want, make your space accessible to people only if they are at a location you specify using this map. Think of it kind of like a treasure hunt or Pokemon Go or geocaching. In the Hoverlay app, which is where you view your AR experiences using a phone or tablet, you can find other people's channels and see if there are any spaces near your location. And I recommend you go check it because who knows? There might even be one within walking distance to you right now. So feel free to mess around with this feature. You can place a pin directly on the map or use the search bar above it to enter an address. You can also specify how big of a range, or rather how close someone has to be to be able to view your space. And you can also set the start and end dates that the space is technically live for if you're doing an event or something that is time sensitive. But however, for this video, we're going to turn this feature off. And you can do that by clicking the button in the top left that says restrict access to link or QR code only. And lastly, give your space a name. I'm going to call mine Hello Space, because we're making spaces in 3D space. Once you have that, click Next. Now we need to decide what we're going to put in our augmented reality experience. And there are a number of options to choose from. You can upload images, 3D models, videos. If you film yourself in front of a green screen, you can turn yourself into a hologram. Even photos and videos from a 360-degree camera, if you have access to one, can be uploaded as a portal that you can walk into. So feel free to upload any file you want, but if you want to follow along with me, I provided y'all with a free 3D model, which I will be using for the rest of the tutorial. You can find that model in the description below this video. Feel free to pause it and come back once you have that downloaded, and we'll move right along. Once you have that model, click Add under the 3D Object option, and now we have a new menu where we're going to create our object. First off, we have to upload it. So you can do that by clicking in the gray box or just dragging and dropping the file here. And here we get a basic view of our golden idol monkey. I think her name is Suzanne or Susan. I'm just going to call her Suzanne. And you can see that there's an animation playing with it. If you get this warning about your model having issues after uploading, most of the time you can ignore it because the model will work anyways. Feel free to give it a name. I'm just going to leave the default and then set the height of the object. The default is at 100 centimeters, but I've found that 24 inches is a good size for this. Lastly, we can decide if we want our users or our viewers to interact with the object in AR. And so if you leave move, rotate, and scale on, it means that a viewer can move, rotate, and scale the object in augmented reality. Lastly, in the bottom left, if your file size is really big, I highly recommend you compress it, but otherwise we can turn that off. And if you have multiple animations on your model, you can select those here. And we want that animation to loop the entire time, so we'll leave that on. And if you don't know what the size of your file is, Hoverlay will tell you after you upload it. And so in very small font where we dropped the file, you can see that this model is only 34 kilobytes, which is perfect. And once we're happy with that, we can click Next. Okay, now last step. This one's pretty straightforward. Most of the time you're going to use the default positioning on the left. The other option here on the right is using what's called a reference image or an anchor, because it lets you anchor an object to a picture so that when you point at your phone at it, let's say this is the image, the object appears stuck or anchored to that picture. But using anchors is a really big topic with many, many use cases, and that deserves an entire video all on its own. So we will not be covering that today. So all you have to do is select Around Viewers on the left and click Save. And congratulations! You have just made your first working, ready-made AR experience. Without doing anything else, if you point your phone at the QR code on the left side of your screen, you can see your object in augmented reality, so take a minute to try it. If you don't already have it, you will need to download the Hoverlay app in order to see your space. But scanning the QR code on the left will take you to the App Store or Google Play Store. But no spaces can be viewed without that app. And I want to remind you that this process didn't take any coding, it didn't take any app deployment, you didn't have to learn complex 3D software. The simplicity of Hoverlay is that it's simple and intuitive. You now have a ready-made, working augmented reality experience. And best of all, it was completely free. Did I say free? This is free. However, as you'll quickly notice, the object is on the ground. So you can either manually move it using your finger to drag it, or our next step is going to be using the editor here to move that object up, so that every time we start our AR experience, our object is going to be directly in front of us instead of at our feet. And if for some reason you don't see your object on the ground, make sure that you are in fact scanning your QR code in your space editor on your browser, as opposed to mine in the video here, because mine is going to look like what our space will look like at the end of the tutorial. But first, let me give you a little tour. In the middle here is what's called our 3D viewport. It's where most of the magic's going to happen. And there's two main actions we can do. You can either move the camera or move our objects. So with your mouse in the viewport, left click and drag to rotate the camera, right click or use two fingers on a trackpad to pan the camera, and then you can scroll to zoom in and out. If you ever get lost, let's say you end up in the middle of nowhere and you don't know how to get back, you can always reload the page and it will recenter you where we started. So take a minute to pause the video, play around, especially if it's your first time in a 3D environment, and once you're comfortable with moving the camera, come back. Now you might be wondering, who is this cute red figure in the center of our space? Because they didn't show up when we looked at it in AR. Well, they are us. But what do I mean? They are not us in a physical sense, but figuratively, they represent whoever is viewing the augmented reality experience. And they should really be holding up a phone to better convey this idea. But in this example, since the monkey is at the avatar's feet, that's why the object appears on the floor when we see it in AR. So now we want to move it up so that it's in front of the avatar. On the right is also the object we just added. So click on it and you'll see that it starts to glow yellow in our editor, and some arrows have shown up around it. These arrows are also called handles. So what we want to do is drag the up arrow to move our object up in space. Now click save on the left and reload your AR experience, and you'll see that the object is directly in front of us. Now on your phone, to see those changes made, you need to reload your space. And so to reload your space, either close the app and rescan the QR code, or just press the little reload button in the top right corner.
That was easy.
And so this time, when you're viewing it in AR, try moving the object with your finger. You can either tap and drag the object with one finger, or with two fingers, you can rotate and scale it. And while you're trying that, it's worth noting that any changes that you make to the model when you're viewing it through the phone in augmented reality, those will not be saved. So if we move it and scale it and rotate it in the phone, this isn't going to change the starting position that we set up in the space editor. So no matter what, the space will always look exactly how we saved it in our 3D viewport. Some other ways you can manipulate your object is rotate and scale. Either click on scale in the top left, or you can just click the shortcut S on your keyboard, and you'll see the handles change from arrows to squares. So now if we click and drag it, we can make our monkey really big or really, really, really tiny. And again, when you click save, those changes will immediately be made and ready to view in AR. Now to rotate, again, either click rotate in the top left or use the shortcut R for rotate. And this time you'll see our handles have turned into spheres. And if you were to click and drag on any of those spheres, you can rotate your object. So once you're comfortable moving the camera and manipulating objects, we're going to jump into some tips and tricks that are going to make your life a whole lot easier when editing your space. The first trick I have is if you hold shift and drag any of the handles, it will move it in increments. If you want to be even more exact with your measurements, there's a drop down on the right under your object that lets you manually type in the measurements that you want. Now, if you'd rather work in feet instead of meters, you can click on your profile picture in the top right, go to channel, and here you can change your system from metric to imperial. Sometimes it's helpful to see what the viewer would see in this editor instead of having to pull out the phone every time. And you can do that by turning first-person view on in the bottom right. And even here, if you want to manipulate your objects, you can see those changes happening. Now we can add as many objects as we like to our space. Let's quickly go through that process. You can add another object to your space by clicking Add Object in the top right, where we are taken back to our object creation menu. And here you can go through that process again of choosing the object you want and uploading your file. However, let's say I want to reuse the monkey object we already created from earlier. Instead of making another 3D object and uploading the same file as before, there's a menu on the right here that says Reuse an existing object. And if you click on that, you'll see all of the objects that you've made on your channel, regardless of what space you made them for. Click on the object you want to add and click Done. Easy as pie, we have another object in our space, and you can see in our object list on the right that it created what's called a clone. Now we'll talk about the importance of clones in just a second, but first I want to move our two objects so that they are side by side. This time I'm going to go into my first person view, but this time I'm going to use the shortcut V. And from here, I'm going to move my objects into place. So I'm going to move the camera down, click on this new object, move it to the right and up. Make sure those are side by side. Move our original object to the left. And now we've lined them up. If you repeat this process multiple times, you can have as many objects as you want in your space. It is worth noting, however, the more objects we add, the longer our space is going to take to load. This is because our phone is technically downloading these files when we load the space for the first time. So if you notice your space is taking a long time to load on your phone, it's either because you have bad internet or because there's a lot of data to download. Now to keep track of this, that's what this download score visual is for in the bottom left. This helps keep track of how big your space is, and the size of your space is just the sum of all of the files, all the photos, all the videos, all the 3D models that we've added to it. So I have two tips. Number one is I recommend keeping your entire space under 20 megabytes. The second goes back to a topic from earlier, and that's using clones as much as possible. A clone is when you reuse the same object from the object library, as opposed to creating an entirely new object using the same file, which is what we did earlier. But to show that again, when you add an object, instead of uploading your file again, you want to go to reuse an existing object and add the clone here. Okay, next up we're going to edit our objects. So let's say we've got all of our objects in place, but we just want to swap it with a new model or change the height or some of the settings that we've set. If you look in your list of objects and see the pencil icon, this will take you back to the object editor. So we can change the height, we can make it uninteractable, and we can even swap it with a new file if we want to. However, let's say you made all these changes and you want to revert back to the original. Clicking cancel will always take it back to its original state. The last two buttons on the right here will not be covered in this video because they are big topics on their own. Adding anchors, as I mentioned earlier, lets us change the origin of our space to be an image. So instead of having this big red avatar viewer placeholder at the center, it would be an image or a mural or a logo or a billboard of our choosing. And now to my favorite feature called sequences, which is going to take any of your experiences to the next level. Similar to how PowerPoint's animation system works, sequences gives you precise control over your space's interactivity and general flow. So you can create entrance and exit animations of your objects. You can trigger animations based off of how close someone is to an object. You can make objects tappable and things happen. You can link between different spaces. You can set up custom timing controls and switch between different models and textures. You can set up objects that follow the screen when you move around, or web browsing integration. And all of this is going to bring your virtual spaces to life. It really makes them feel like a game, and this is where your experiences are going to stand out from the rest. Now, because it's such a great and powerful feature, it's only available if you upgrade your account to the Pro plan. And I'll be doing a whole other video on sequences and everything that the Pro plan has to offer. But if sequences is something that you'd be interested in, consider upgrading your account. And you can find all of those different pricing plans in a link in the description below. Now let's look at some of these settings we can adjust with our space by clicking the settings button in the top left. The first menu lets you change the location settings. You can always turn it back on or turn it off if you want to readjust where on the map your space lives. Another way we can orient our space is aligning it with a compass. So if you turn this option on, click Save, and go back to our space editor, which you can either do by clicking back or using the path above it, you can see that we have a compass on the ground. And so every time we start our AR experience, our objects are going to be facing north. And if we go back to settings, change this to east, click Save, now we'll see that our objects are always pointing east. And so again, when you reload the experience, the objects are going to be oriented eastbound. Most of the time I don't use this option to orient my space, but when I need it, it's very helpful. Let's turn that off and go to duration, where you will see nothing. The duration only works if you have the map also activated. So if we turn that off, click save, go back to duration, we can change those settings here. And now let's go to the graphics tab. This graphic tab is fun because it allows you to play with some visual effects, create some more realism in your space. By default, objects always cast shadows, which gives it a more realistic look. Sometimes you might not want it, you can turn that off. But it tends to help with the realism of making it look like your objects are physically there. Light estimation means, is our phone processing the light around us as we're viewing it in AR? So let's say you want reflections or you want accurate lighting to your objects. In a sense, it's just copying light and pasting it onto our digital objects in order to increase the realism of our spaces. So those two effects are always on by default. The last effect that is always on by default is setting a fake floor. So what this means is that sometimes your phone takes a second or two to scan the room and figure out what the floor is. And this kind of cuts out that initial seconds by doing its best to guess or estimate where the floor is. Now, the reason you'd want this on is that if you have it off, at the start of your experiences, your objects won't have shadows while the phone initially tries to figure out where the different planes and surfaces and ground are. So while the fake floor option enhances visual consistency, where shadows show up immediately and all of your objects are on the same plane, disabling it will provide more accurate surface mapping for complex environments with multiple elevation levels. An example for when you might want this feature off is, let's say you are on a bridge and you want your objects to appear in the water below you. So disabling it provides more accurate surface mapping for complex spaces with multiple elevation levels. And that brings us to this effect called occlusion. Occlusion acts like a mask or a cookie cutter, making one object hide behind another. Without occlusion, if a person walks in front of your object during an AR experience, the object actually stays in front of it because it doesn't know to cut out the person. Turning human occlusion on allows the phone to detect people, making them block or occlude objects that are behind them, mimicking a real-life scenario. However, this only works on newer phones, and if you're curious if your phone is compatible with this feature, there's a list that I've provided in the description. At the bottom here is your loader tips, which allow you to add messages that show up while your space is loading. These can be helpful tips like watch out for traffic or be careful of your surroundings, or something simple like hello. And once we set what we like, we can click save and go to our thumbnail. And the thumbnail lets you upload a logo or an image that people will see when they find your space on the map. And the last setting here is called Space Copy. It's only available if you've upgraded your account to the Pro plan, but you can basically make duplicate copies of your space, which is great for creating backups or alternate versions of your space. Now that we've talked about our space settings, let's look at some of these other tabs at the top. Starting with the Home tab, this is where you land every time you log into your account. You can find frequently asked questions on the left. You can also join the Slack page where you can ask questions one-on-one. I'm in there all the time asking and answering questions. And moving on to the My Spaces tab. Now I know we've looked at the My Spaces tab before, but now we have our space that we just made. You can see how many times your space has been viewed by other people. You can click on the pencil icon if you want to edit it. Go back to the space settings, or for whatever reason, just delete it. You can also create tags or labels if you want to organize your spaces. And on the right side, you can see all of your spaces spread out on the map. However, even if you've turned the map setting off in the spaces settings, it's still going to show up on this map even if it doesn't show up in the app. And lastly, to get rid of this map feature altogether, you can turn the list view on. Moving right along, in the objects library, you will see all of the objects that you've ever uploaded to Hoverlay. And from here, you can either add an object, you can see all the ones they're used in, and even go into the editor of that space. You can download the file, you can edit the object, or for whatever reason, delete it. There's also this nice search bar you can use, especially when you start getting hundreds and hundreds of objects. Now in the Analytics tab, it gives you a simple breakdown of your views, your most viewed experience, your least viewed experience, and how many are currently active. And lastly, clicking on Documentation will take you to the Hoverlay docs, where you can read and learn about everything that has to do with Hoverlay. So that's the end of this introduction to Hoverlay and augmented reality. Hopefully you got a little bit, if not as excited about AR as I am. There's a whole lot we didn't cover, including anchor images and site-specific spaces and all the features that Hoverlay offers on its Pro plan. So check out my YouTube for some other videos. Please leave this video a like and comment what else you want to see. It would mean a whole lot to me. You can also check out my socials on Instagram and TikTok, and until next time, stay real.